maybe the very last thing that these systems will be able to do, these LLMs will be able to do, is, given the laws of physics as we understood them at the turn of the last century, invent general relativity from that. So I think that's probably the terminal step. And then once it can do that, if it can do that, then there won't be much else to do as far as humans are concerned. It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, particularly coming from a physics background in which progress is pretty slow, to come to the AI field and see progress being so extraordinarily rapid, day by day, week by week, year by year. Looking at it, it certainly looks like these LLMs and these AI systems, in some sense, are just interpolators, but the level of abstraction at which they're interpolating keeps going up and up and up. And we keep sort of riding up that chain of abstractions. And then presumably, from a sufficiently elevated point of view, the invention of general relativity from Newtonian physics is just interpolation at some sufficiently grandiose level of abstraction that perhaps tells us something about the nature of intelligence, human intelligence, as well as about these large language models. If you ask me how many years until we can do that, that is not totally clear, but in some sense, general relativity was the greatest leap that humanity ever made. And once we can do that, perhaps in 10 years, then we will have fully encompassed human intelligence. Will it be of the same character as what Einstein did? Clearly, there are many disanalogies between human intelligence and these large language models, but I think at the right level of abstraction, it may be the same.
Do you think AI mathematicians, AI physicists will have advantages over humans just because they can, by default, think in terms of weird dimensions and manifolds in a way that doesn't natively come to humans?
I think maybe we need to back up to in what sense do humans do or don't think natively in high dimensions. Obviously, it's not our natural space.
Yeah.
There was a technology that was invented to think about these things, which was notation, tensor notation, various other things that allows you to using just even writing, as Einstein did 100 years ago, allows you to sort of naturally move between dimensions. And then you're thinking more about manipulating these mathematical objects than you are about thinking in higher dimensions. I don't think there's any sense, in which large language models naturally think in higher dimensions more than humans do. You could say, well, this large language models have billions of parameters. That's like a billion dimensional space. But you could say the same about the human brain, that it has all of these billions of parameters and is therefore billion dimensional. Whether that fact translates into thinking in billions of spatial dimensions, I don't really see that in the human, and I don't think that applies to an LLM either.
Yeah, I guess you could imagine that if you're just seeing like a million different problems that rely on doing this weird tensor math, then in the same way that maybe even a human it gets trained up through that to build better intuitions, the same thing would happen to AI. It just sees more problems and can develop better representations of these kinds of weird geometries or something.
I think that's certainly true. That it is definitely seeing more examples than any of us will ever see in our life. And it is perhaps going to build more sophisticated representations than we have.
Yeah.
Often in the history of physics, a breakthrough is just how you think about it, what representation you do. It is sometimes jokingly said that Einstein's greatest contribution to physics was his a certain notation he invented called the Einstein summation convention, which allowed you to more easily express and think about these things in a more compact way that strips away some of the other things. Penrose, one of his great contributions was just writing down inventing a new notation for thinking about some of these space-times and how they work that made certain other things clear. So clearly, coming up with the right representation has been an incredibly powerful tool in the history of physics, and many incredibly large developments, somewhat analogous to coming up with a new experimental technique in some of the more applied scientific domains. And yeah, one would hope that as these large language models get better, they come up with better representations, at least better representations for them that may not be the same as a good representation for us.
So There's an interesting question here. Clearly, these models know a lot, and that's evidenced by the fact that even professional physicists can ask and learn about fields that they're less familiar with. But this doesn't this raise the question of, we think these things are smart and getting smarter. If a human that is reasonably smart had memorized basically every single field and knew about the open problems in other fields and how they might connect to this field, knew about potential discrepancies and connections, what you might expect them to be able to do is not like Einstein level conceptual leaps, but there are a lot of things where just like, hey, magnesium correlates with this kind of phenomenon of the brain. This kind of phenomenon correlates with headaches. Therefore, maybe magnesium supplements cure headaches. These kinds of like basic connections you would... Anyways, does this suggest that LLMs are, as far as intelligence goes, even weaker than we might expect, given the fact that, given their overwhelming advantages in terms of knowledge, they're not able to already translate that into new discoveries?
Yes, they definitely have different strengths and weaknesses than humans. And obviously one of their strengths is that they have read way more than any human will ever read in their entire life. I think maybe, again, the analogy with chess programs is a good one here. They will often consider way more possible positions, sort of Monte Carlo research, than any human chess player ever would. And yet, even at human level strength, if you fix human level strength, they're still doing way more search, so that their ability to evaluate is maybe not quite as natural as a human. So the same, I think, would be true of physics. If you had a human who had read as much and retained as much as they had, you might expect them to be even stronger.
Scott Aronson recently, or it was a year or so ago, he posted about the fact that the GPT-4 got like a B or an A minus or something on his Intro to Quantum Computing class, which is definitely a higher grade than I got, and so I'm already below the waterline. But you teach a bunch of subjects, including GR at Stanford. I assume you've been querying these models with questions from these exams. How has their performance changed over time?
Yeah, I take an exam I gave years ago in my graduate general relativity class at Stanford and give it to these models, and it's pretty extraordinary. 3 years ago, zero. A year ago, they were doing pretty well, maybe a weak student, but in the distribution. And now they essentially ace the test. In fact, that I'm retiring that. That's just my own little private eval. I don't, it's not published anywhere, but I just give them this thing just to follow along how they're doing, and it's pretty strong. It's maybe easy by the standard of graduate courses, but a graduate course in general relativity, and they get pretty much everything right on the final exam. That's just in the last couple of months that these have been doing that.
What is required to ace a test? Obviously, like they probably have like read about all the general relativity textbooks, but I assume to ace a test, you like need something beyond that. Is there something you would characterize?
Physics problems compared to maths problems tend to have two components. One is to sort of take this word question and like turn it using your physics knowledge into a maths question, and then solve the maths question. That tends to be the typical structure of these problems. So you need to be able to do both. The bit that's maybe only LLMs can do and wouldn't be so easy for other things is step one of that, is like turning it into a maths problem. I think if you ask them hard research problems, you certainly can come up with problems that they can't solve. That's for sure. But it's pretty noticeable as we have tried to develop evaluations for these models that as recently as a couple of years ago, certainly 3 years ago, you just scrape from the internet any number of problems that are totally standard high school maths problems that they couldn't do. And now we need to hire PhDs in whatever field, and they come up with one great problem a day or something. The difficulty, as these LLMs have got stronger, the difficulty of evaluating their performance has increased.